Hey, my name is Dominic. I own a float center here in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, and this is going to be a general orientation into floating for the first time or even just a refresher. I've tried to keep it as general as I can so that you can take it into any float center that you go to. There are specific things that you'll need to ask your float host about at your float center when you're there, and I'll make sure to mention that in the video where you need to consult with them. So the most important thing is to consider what your expectations are for your float. If you have a specific benefit, an outcome, an experience that you're going after, if you chase that down, you often just get further and further away from that thing. So every float you do today and for the rest of your life, you need to come in and just surrender. Let go of control, let that experience come to you versus you go to it. And so to help you do that, it's all about letting go physically. Try not to get too busy with the distracting chatter of your mind. From a physical perspective, super simple thing to do. All of that salt there's about 1,000 pounds of it. That's how much salt is gonna be in your float cabin. This is not gonna be like the ocean or the lakes or the pools where you have to flex your abs and move your arms and legs to keep your head above water. In this kind of salt water, you're gonna be perfectly suspended in space without any effort. It is amazing. But what is not amazing, if you get that salt water in your mouth or your nose or your eyes. I don't tell you this to worry you, but when you are floating, the level gets really close to the side of your eyes. And sometimes when we float, we're like, this is too close, I don't want to get it in my eyes, and we'll start holding our heads up to avoid it. We mostly do this subconsciously, but if you're holding your head up during the float, it's gonna cause a bit of tension in the neck and it's gonna be distracting. So physically, super simple thing to do. Harder part for most people will be the distractions of the mind. The common one for most people is going to be time. How much time has passed, how much time is left. You might even think that we have forgot you in there at some point. I promise you, we will not. We're going to play some nice gentle music at the end to let you know that your float is done. But if you felt at any point that you were finished, and that could be 2 minutes in, 20 minutes in, it doesn't matter. If you feel like you were done and you want to get out, you just get out. There's no pressure to stay in there. So time is one distraction. The bigger distraction is going to be the chatter of the mind. That could be work, finances, relationships, to-do list, groceries, life, blah, 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 blah. All that stuff that is going on up there. If you try to think through everything that is coming up in the float, that can get quite overwhelming. On the flip side, if you were trying to be completely thoughtless, that is not the point. You're mostly just giving yourself that space so that when these thoughts come up, you can be selective to engage with them or you can just let them go. If you're planning dinner tonight, weekend plans, those are usually the thoughts that can wait till after the float. But if something comes up that is important, and that could be something in a positive way, or it could even be something that you're struggling with, just be selective to engage with them or to not. And so to help you kind of do that, a practice of meditation or mindfulness, these kind of techniques can be really helpful. Check out the other video for tips on how to do that. When you're doing these techniques in meditation, or when you're doing the float in general, stillness is very important. And obviously, if you need to adjust the body, do so. But if you move around too much, you start to slowly stir the water like a spoon. That can release the heat. It can get a little bit colder. But more importantly, if you move around too much during the float, you're likely going to remain in this space of consciousness that we're in right now, which is a perfect place to be. But maybe we'll start to want to venture into these deeper pockets of consciousness. This could be deep meditation, the gap, the void. There's lots of names for this space, and there's lots of depth to it. When you slip into these pockets while you're floating, it can often feel like you are sleeping. And if you are really, really tired, you might actually fall asleep in there. And if you do, it is gonna be amazing. It's gonna be one of the best sleeps you ever get. I promise you will not successfully roll over in it. It is very difficult to do so. But while you're in these pockets of space, sometimes we'll be in them, and then all of a sudden we're gonna twitch out of it. And it can be pretty abrupt when that happens, but there's nothing wrong. You're just letting go of some tension, some energy. Most likely, you've slipped further into that pocket in a way that you have not done so before. And intuitively, there's a program in you that just goes, this is kind of weird, and we just kind of shake out of it. All is well. Try not to have too much of a conversation about it and just go right back to where you were. But I find before the mind is gonna relax, it's good to relax the body physically first. So what I recommend doing at the beginning of your float is take all your attention and your awareness and draw that into your foot to begin with. Explore this area for any sore muscles, any tension, any weird holding patterns. Even just flex it for a second and then just relax it. Trust the water to support it perfectly. Once your foot's relaxed, do the same thing in your calves, your knees, your hips, your butt, your back, your arms, your neck. Go through your whole body as fast, as slow, as many times as you need, just letting go of any tension that you find along the way. Another thing to consider at this point is any chronic tension in your body. That could be the neck and the shoulders and the back, and it could be injuries. We are sensory beings. We are always processing information from our environments all the time. Sights, sounds, touch, gravity, people, notifications, everything. So when you go into a sensory deprivation experience like this, you are going to crave to feel something. And so the easiest place to satisfy that craving to feel something is going to be through the chronic tension and the injuries. It could even just be an itch that's not going away. It could be one of those thoughts that keeps looping. It could be a little sound that you hear. But if all of your attention floods into that one distraction, you're going to be distracted. If your internal conversation starts feeding it negativity, this is annoying, this is uncomfortable, I don't like this, it's just going to amplify that distraction and become overwhelming. You need to have a positive conversation. It's okay, relax, send it some good intentions versus dwelling on that distraction. Hopefully you find it just disappears. Now, before we go to the back, I want to talk about vulnerability. I'm a bit claustrophobic, so I kept the lights on and door open for the first few floats. There is zero pressure to go into that full sensory deprivation experience while you're here. I can promise you, after hundreds of floats, lights on, lights off, it really doesn't make a difference. You're still gonna have a great experience. So always do what is best for you while you're here. Now, let's take you through the rest of this space. So when you go floating, you may be floating in one of these cabins, it could be a tank, it could be a pod, it could be an open room. But likely in the room there's going to be some type of box that includes the filtration system. We use particle filters, ozone injection, hydrogen peroxide, UV light. We could also use bromine and chlorine depending on the state and the province. But if you have any questions on how that water is clean and disinfected between every floater, just ask the float center on what they're specifically using. And then after you've used your washroom and you're coming into your float room, there's gonna be some way to set up the lights to either go completely dark or keep them a little bit on. My lights are different than every other center, so ask your float host on how to use them properly for what you want in your experience. You're likely gonna be offered one of these 3 earplugs. With these putty ones, they're very simple. Just roll them into a ball like a marble, and you're gonna pack it into your ear nice and tight so that it seals your ear so no water gets in. With the other 2, reach around the head, pull the hair out of the way, pull your ear up, away, or down, in whatever way opens up the ear channel the most so that the earplug can slide in easily. With the foam ones, you gotta make sure you prepare them properly before you put them into your ear. And what you do is you just gently roll them into a tight, long needle, just like that. Don't flatten them, don't roll them into a ball. You gotta make sure they're nice and thin so they can slide in easily and further. You wanna put these on before you take off your clothes, especially before your first shower, because if your ears are wet when you're putting them in, they're gonna slide right out. And if you lose these when you're floating, or if they're uncomfortable and you just kind of pulled them out, it is totally fine to get that water in your ears. A lot of people even float without them, like myself. But if you get any salt water in your ear, at the end you have to thoroughly flush your ears out several times with hot water to rinse them out. If you do feel any discomfort the next day, you're gonna mix half warm water with half vinegar and flush them out again. So before you go into the float cabin, you're gonna have a shower to rinse off thoroughly from head to toe. This is not like a shower before you go to the pool where you just get a bit wet and jump in. We need you to clean yourself off thoroughly. Get all the lotions, the oils, the hair products, the deodorants. You need to be clean before you're going in here. And with that first shower, do not make the water hot. If you do, it's gonna feel colder when you get in there. Have a hot shower at the end when you're rinsing off all that salt. A really good trick though, before you go in, you're gonna take this face cloth. Gently pat dry all the water off of your face. Get the creases of your eyes, your nose, your lips, the facial hair. If you get any drops forming during the float, or if you feel that evaporation of water on your face, it can be quite distracting when you're in there. And then what I recommend doing with the face cloth, pat dry any areas that are sensitive or if you have any cuts. Then you're gonna apply a thin layer of Vaseline to provide a bit more protection. When you go in here, you may discover a cut or something sensitive that you have forgot about. You're gonna find out instantly. It goes up in discomfort, but it does go away quickly too. Just give it a few minutes, it should disappear. And then as you're getting in, you're gonna take your face cloth and you're gonna park it on the inside of one of those handlebars. If you ever feel the need to touch your face when you are floating, as much as you think you're gonna shake it off your hands and go like this, it doesn't work. You will get it in your eyes. It's very likely that this is gonna happen one day. It's a valuable learning experience to never do that again. When it does happen though, just slowly get out, rinse off your face, jump back in. But if you felt a need to do anything in this area, please use that cloth on that handlebar instead. You can sometimes forget where the door is to get out because it's dark. It's okay, you're in this much water, just sit up on your bum, go on your knees, gently feel along the walls until you find those two handles on the inside. You know where to push the door open. I've had to go around this thing many times. I promise you, you're gonna find it, just remain calm. If you want to keep the door a little bit open during the float, if you close the door very gently, it stops on that hook, it keeps a gap in the door. This will let more light and air into the cabin. But if you keep it open for too long, it can get a little bit drafty and cold. So you may have to close it over at some point. When you're getting in, you're gonna hold on to the handlebars on the outside and the inside to brace yourself. As you slowly sit down and you slowly lean back, be present in this moment. You're about to experience that weightlessness, that lack of gravity. It feels amazing. Just be present to enjoy that moment. And then spend as much time as you need. Just spend a few moments getting used to this space, how dark it is, how quiet it is. I recommend stretching out the body, bouncing off the walls. Figure out how you want to position your arms to be as physically comfortable and still as possible during the float. Once you're done getting used to the space and you want to start getting into that stillness or using some of those meditation techniques, before you do any of that, as you're floating, put your arms on the side of the cabin, hold yourself still until you feel like there's no more water pushing your body around. Once you find that stillness, just slowly park your arms where it's comfortable. That's going to stop you from bouncing off the walls in here. You don't have to be perfectly centered. As long as you are not touching a wall, you are perfect. But you will find at some point a part of the body may touch and you'll feel the need to push off from that point. But if you do, you're gonna hit the other side. So when you hit the wall, don't reset, don't even push off a tiny bit. Hit it and do nothing. You'll naturally bounce away, but you won't hit the other side. When you start hearing music, and you will hear it with the earplugs, so don't worry, that is the cue that the float is finished. There's no rush, take your time, reach out for the handles on the inside and slowly stand up. Before you get out though, if you can drip off as much salt water as possible from your body and your hair, before you exit, it just helps us keep the salt in here and less of it out here. And then when you're in these rooms, if you can use this side of the towel as a wet area, this side's a dry area, that really helps us a lot in keeping the space clean. You'll have a nice hot shower at the end to rinse off all that salt water. Then you'll use the towel to dry off at the end. If your neck is sore when you're floating, it's usually that subconscious holding of your head above the water. If you're not doing this, but you're feeling a bit of tension, even try floating with your arms above your head. This will let a lot of pressure off the neck and the shoulders. But if that's not helping, every room has one of these halos. Take it and put it behind your head when you float. It'll give your head a bit more support and take the pressure off the neck. If you brought this in, we do ask you to take it out along with a towel, or if you lost your earplugs, we'll still check to make sure there's nothing left in there, but it just makes it so much easier for us to turn over the rooms for the next floater. This here is our post-float lounge. When you finish your float, you might be feeling a little bit sensitive or delicate, and you may need an extra moment before you venture back into that outside world. It also gives you a chance to help integrate, to understand, to appreciate the float experience, and having this space is a perfect complement to the float. The last thing to keep in mind is floating is a practice and there is a learning curve. It is going to take you several floats to get good at floating, which is mostly just getting used to the new environment, learning how to surrender control of what's going to happen, trusting the water. It takes a few floats to get acquainted with the practice. Once you're through the learning curve, it's all about consistency, ideally floating 1 to 3 times a month. When you start doing that and finding yourself consistently venturing into those deeper pockets of space, this is going to bless you with so many opportunities of growth and just improving your overall well-being. If you have any questions ever about floating or the space, please don't hesitate to ask any one of us that is hosting you. And I very much appreciate the support, and I look forward to hosting you on your next float. Take care. Bye.